Welcome students and teachers. This video we will talk about a very fascinating planet, a planet that has captivated interest across various civilizations in the history because of its beauty in the evening sky, and named after a Roman goddess of beauty, Venus. But when we learn more about this planet up close, we realize it is anything but beautiful. So, let us dive in why. In literature, you will find Venus being mentioned as Earth's twin quite often, and you would rightly see mass of Venus is roughly 80% that of the Earth, radius is about 95% and density, acceleration due to gravity, all these parameters quite close to Earth, both of them have an atmosphere. So, it was a popular belief back then that Venus, a terrestrial planet closer to Earth, has Earth-like properties. Some recent measurements have revealed that Venus may also have Earth-like structure, internal structure, and it has similar to Earth a crust, a mantle, a core and an atmosphere. However, there is a very limited observable magnetic field, and that is due to the fact that Venus rotates quite slow as compared to other planets, and there are some theories proposed, but no definite answer yet. If you observe how Venus rotates, compared to all other planets, it rotates actually in the opposite direction from east to west. Although its tilt is almost 3 degree compared to orbital plane. However, when we report its axial tilt, we say it is 177 degree roughly, because the direction of angular momentum is governed by right hand rule, and if it is rotating in the opposite direction, the axis tilt will also be measured accordingly. If we notice, the rotational period is roughly 243 days, 243 Earth days, which is very slow compared to other objects. In that slow, that the time period Venus takes to complete one orbit around the sun is a shorter time period, it is around 224 days. So, year on Venus is shorter than a solar day on the planet. This, to grasp an idea how slow this rotation is, if there is a sunset at Venus, you can practically jog to other location and see the even at the equator and see the sunset again. So, it is quite slow in that sense. It is around 70% closer than the Earth in its orbit. So, it obviously receives much more sunlight than the Earth. So, it is expected that Venus will be slightly warm. However, that will be an understatement, and we will see why this is not the case. Venus shows one of the extreme temperatures on its surface. The average temperature is significantly uniform, around 465 degrees Celsius, which is very hot, hot enough to melt metals like lead, zinc and tin. So, if we try to send any space rover or probe, likely they will get melted, and we will see in the later slides. Despite the fact that Venus receives only 25% flux that Mercury receives, its temperature is significantly high, and it is the hottest object, which was quite surprising when initially these things were observed. And it is not because it is closer to the Earth, hence its temperature is high. There is a phenomenon called runaway greenhouse effect. So, greenhouse effect was known to scientists back then, that there are certain gases in the atmosphere that traps the heat from the sun, does not allow those heats to escape, but Venus took it a notch higher. So, Venus has one of the very thick and very dense clouds, dense atmosphere, and that makes this planet very hostile. So, as the theory goes, there was a time when Venus was probably Earth-like, there were some shallow oceans on the surface, but because of the heat, those oceans became water vapors and started to trap more and more heat, because water vapors are also good greenhouse gases. So, as the temperature rise, it drove more greenhouse volatile gases to escape. They in turn rose the surface temperature higher, and it went to such an extent that carbon dioxide trapped in the rocks on the surfaces, they started escaping, and that actually escalated the greenhouse effect. And right now, if you look at surface of the Martian atmosphere, it is mostly the composition is carbon dioxide. Around 96% molecules in the atmosphere are carbon dioxide with around 3% of nitrogen, and you will even see sulfuric acid as clouds. So, in Venus it rains sulfuric acid, but it is so hot that even before it touches the ground it vaporizes. So, as you can see, it is a quite hostile and unforgiving environment, and so far there are very limited things that can survive such a harsh environment. We have observed some volcanic activities on the Venus. As I have already mentioned, the environment is quite harsh, mostly CO2, therefore very hot. The pressure of the atmosphere is 92 times that you observe on Earth's sea level, which is equivalent to diving into sea water around 1 kilometer. So, it is a very crushing temperature. Even though some of the wind speed are quite low, the effect is quite harsh, and the environment is so hostile that it rains acid. It is quite hot and have a very high pressure atmosphere. So, not a very ideal place to send humans or space mission on the surface. There was one space mission sent in early 1960s called Mariner 2 by NASA, and this was a flyby mission. That means it just passed by the moon and didn't orbit or land, but because of the way Venus changed the trajectory of this space probe, we were able to for the first time accurately measure the mass of the Venus. Venus, as we know, does not have a moon. Typically smaller celestial objects, if you measure the time period around larger celestial objects, they help us determine the mass of the central object using Kepler's law. But before this mission was sent, there was no accurate measurement of mass of the planet. This takes us to the next topic of this video, is what are the space missions that we have sent to Venus and what we have learned so far. So, Mariner 2 we have already talked about. It was the first mission that confirmed that yes, the surface of Venus is quite hot. Venera 7 and Venera 13 are one of the few highlights of the Venera mission. It is Russian for the name Venus, and it is the only mission that has sent lander on the surface of the planet, and few of them have taken and transmitted panoramic images in black and white and colored, and we know a little bit about the soil and surface parameters. Rest of the missions that have been sent so far have mostly done atmospheric studies or radar measurements, and we know decent amount of we have decent amount of understanding how the temperature and pressure and other composition varies on the Venus atmosphere. So, as I have already talked, till date there are very few images that we have taken from the surface of the this very harsh planet. It's surprising how scientists were able to construct a probe that was able to survive the landing through that harsh atmosphere, touch down on the surface, was still survive enough to take photographs such extreme environment, and still was able to transmit these images at that time. So, and as you could see, the maximum time a space mission was active on the surface of Venus was around 2 hours, and till date no mission more than that time has survived. If you compare this to, let us say, missions on Mars, rovers have survived more than a decade, and some of them are still working. So, and however, that does not stop us. There are several space organizations that are still working on what other missions to be sent. Venus Life Finder is one of them. Voice by China, Da Vinci Plus, it is planned to observe the atmospheric parameters. Venus orbiter mission by ISRO is also under development, and Venera D is what Russia plans to come back as at the time of this recording. So, these are some of the planned missions. So, before we leave, one interesting question to think about: the surface of Venus is covered by such a thick layer of atmosphere that we practically do not see the stellar sky at all. On Earth, in comparison, on Earth the daily motion of stars are clearly visible, and from that one could draw the conclusion about rotation nature of the planet. But is such thing possible on Venus? Is it possible for any civilization on the surface with Venus like conditions to identify if the planet is rotating or not? A question to think about. That is all from this video. If you have any doubts or comments on this topic, do let us know, and if there are any topics you would like to know more about, do write us in the comments. Thank you.